Get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Check out the show notes for your promo code to get started podcasting today.
That's a place where I've had a whole lot of pushback. I have tried to break down doors. I have tried to be a resource to them, to allow them to then forward our education system so that we don't continue to have this trickle down effect of graduating hairstylists that don't know how to do all types of hair, right? That's where the change really needs to happen.
Hello again. I'm your host, Angela Taylor, and welcome back to Unlocking the Club. I'm really excited to be in conversation with you and with a really special guest today, which has become one of my favorite parts of the week, when I'm able to be in conversation and truly when I'm able to create this space where my guests and I discuss not only what we're up to in our lives, both professionally and personally, but I think more importantly and more uniquely, we actually are able to have a candid conversation about who we've had to be back in the day, currently, and who we think we're going to have to be in the future to accomplish our goals, to navigate the challenges and the obstacles that have been in our way, and to create the opportunities and fulfill the dreams that we all have in store. And so Unlocking the Club is a space where we hope that you, our listeners, are able to connect with us, connect with these stories, to see yourself in these stories in a way that maybe you haven't before, in a way that maybe you haven't heard the candor and the real talk discussed in public domain. Unlocking the Club has been so cathartic for me individually, and listening to the stories as they're revealed by each of the guests that I've had on the show. And this is episode 33 that we're about to have. And there have been 32 amazing conversations that have preceded this one. And I know today we're going to have a very similar conversation. And I think the conversation today actually is going to resonate with many of you who are out there listening. Oftentimes when I've had conversations with our guests on previous shows, after we stop recording, we share a lot of laughs and new realizations and exchange a lot of ideas about what else we would love to talk about. And one of the topics that consistently comes up in those discussions is talking about our hair. So many guests, and I am very much the same, talk about along our way on our journey, if we were in corporate America, if we were in the legal profession, if we were in higher education or wherever we've been, at some stage on our journey, we've actually had to address our hair. Were we gonna spend $100 getting a perm, right? Burning our scalp with putting perm and relaxer on, or were we going to wear our hair natural? And it felt like up until recently, maybe the last 5 to 7 years, many felt like they couldn't wear their natural hair. But those of us that have chosen to start wearing our hair naturally, there's been this sense of freedom that we've experienced as a result. And there's a lot that is beneath the surface of that story. And we want to unpack that a little bit and really start to share what our hair means to us, what our ability to decide how we want to wear our hair, how that really matters and allows us to reclaim our power. And I think today we have the perfect guest to discuss this. I'm really excited to unlock this topic and so much more on Unlocking the Club today with our special guest, Cherie Gatson.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
Cherie Gatson walked into a salon for the very first time when she was 11 years old. 5 minutes later, she walked back out because she was turned away. She was turned away not because she couldn't pay or because she was missing shoes. She was turned away because her hair didn't fit the mold. Her hair was unique in its texture and pattern, and not one of the professional stylists in that particular salon was capable of or interested in caring for her kinks and coils. That experience and many others like it fueled Cherie's decision to become a professional hairstylist. Throughout her 16-year career, she has strived to create a safe haven for all hair types, both beyond and behind the chair and community-wide. In 2020, Cherie and her co-founders were inspired to create Hair Artists in Pursuit of Inclusion, or the acronym HAPPY, HAPI. HAPPY is an education company dedicated to natural hair care advocacy. In just 3 years, they have educated hundreds of salon professionals across the Pacific Northwest about the basics of Black hair care, but more significantly, how to care for Black people in a salon setting. Their work has spilled over into the community, creating workshops for parents and kids, community organizations, businesses, schools, and universities alike. And in April 2021, Cherie opened Happy Hair Studio, a sanctuary for all hair types, textures, and patterns. The salon she wishes she would have walked into as that 11-year-old girl. Thanks for tuning in today as we unlock the club with Cherie Gatson. Thanks for joining us on Unlocking the Club. I'm now joined by Cherie Gatson. How are you, Cherie?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me, Angela. It's an honor.
Oh, it is truly an honor, and we've talked about this a little bit offline, an honor for me to be in conversation with you. And I just read your bio and your story, and I'm so glad that your bio included the story of the 11-year-old girl walking into a salon. And I know that there's so much beyond that. Can you tell us a little bit more about who Cherie Gatson is?
Absolutely. You mentioned the story of myself as an 11-year-old girl, and that's something that has stuck with me for years. I'm 34 now, and it's something that is always in the back of my mind, especially as I became a hairstylist, as I went on to become a salon owner and an educator. One of the reasons why we do what we do is so that, at least in our locale, in our community, no little girl or little boy ever has to feel that way that I did, because it really did shape me. And something about our hair is that, scientifically it's just hair, but emotionally it's so much more. It's our identity. It's how we express ourselves and who we are. And for so long, you mentioned, in the last 5 to 7 years, we have seen, this trend where a lot more people are starting to embrace their natural curls, their kinks, their coils, and it's what we love to see. And, I think we're just at the beginning. There's so much further and farther that we can go. And just here in our local community, this is the Pacific Northwest. So we are in Eugene, Oregon, which is somewhat of a predominantly white area. So we find that our services are even more needed here. We might have, a small Black community here in Eugene, but we're small and mighty, especially because the University of Oregon is here in Eugene. A lot of the Black people that go to the university are not included in our population count, but we are here and we're present. And what we find is that people need to get their hair done, and it's a struggle, especially here. And so, unfortunately, in our education system, it just doesn't do a good job of treating all hair types equally. I've been a hairstylist for many years now. I went to school, 16 plus years ago. And while some things have changed, a lot of stuff has stayed the same, especially in education. And so what we find is that we birth these hairstylists that fundamentally don't know how to deal with curls and embrace them for their natural beauty. So that's something that we have really strived for at Happy, and Happy stands for Hair Artists in Pursuit of Inclusion, and is so very central to who we are. Inclusivity is something that is just so central to our core. When people walk into our salon, regardless of if your hair is straight wavy, curly, kinky, coily, if you're braided or locked, we want to make sure that, the answer to can we do your hair is always yes. And so when somebody walks into our salon, representation is so important. And, I have even to the decor and, the books that we offer for people to read in the salon, I have made sure that everybody sees their self when they walk through the doors. And so that's something that we have really strived for. And even beyond just the salon, community work is so important to me, and accessibility is important. So we understand that sometimes hair care services are not cheap, and we want to make sure that we're being accessible. So if you can't see us in the salon, we're out in the community. And that's something that we have really prioritized as well, just beyond, the business of hair, is making sure that we are offering education to young Black kids, to adoptive parents who may not know how to do hair. Something that we see a lot just being in the Pacific Northwest is we have a lot of beautiful mixed race families here. And a lot of times we find that, the parents are struggling to learn about their kids' hair, not necessarily because they don't have the desire to learn, but because they can't find the resources. And that's something that I think that we really are trying to be here in our community. It's just a resource, whether that's you coming and seeing us in the salon, or whether that's us coming to you.
Yeah. Well, what is evident is how thoughtful and intentional this journey has been for you, and all of the aspects of what you're doing, how you're creating the experience of coming to the salon, as well as the education of being able to do your hair and do it well for stylists and for young people. I would love to kind of step back and say, so how did you get here? Like, what was it that 11-year-old girl, when you walked into that salon and had to walk back out, what have you been holding on to that now has manifested into this incredible thing for so many people in the Eugene community?
Yeah, I think it was that feeling of just not being included, of being excluded, specifically along my personal journey. I was adopted at a very young age, 2 days old. My mother was white and my father is Mexican. And so I didn't have a whole lot of Black representation in my household. And I think the first time that was really apparent to me as a kid was when my mom took me to a salon. She didn't call ahead. We just walked in, and I was turned away immediately because they saw this little girl with a pile of curls and kinks and coils on her hair. And oh my gosh, I have the most hair. So instead of embracing me, it was me being turned away. And at the formative age of 11, that age of 12, 13, where we're really starting to become an individual, it really affected me. And I mean, I remember just getting in that car and my mom, of course, apologizing to me and saying that this isn't the way that it should be, but unfortunately, this is the way it is. And I just remember crying and us going back home, and my mom not realizing at the time that she needed to call ahead because she was a white woman. She can walk into any salon and get her hair done. It's not a question of if, it's when. Yeah. And so once she learned that that was something that she had to account for, I then remember us being at home and her calling multiple salons. I think it was 10 plus salons that she called until she finally found a salon that could take me. And when I did go to that salon, the first thing they did, instead of embracing my curls and teaching me how to care for my natural hair, is they swiped that relaxer all over my head. And it was because in the way that I remember it, I'm sure that different words, but now at my age, it was something along the lines of, this is the best way to manage your hair. And that word manage just really gets to me, just because that is one, incompletely true. As a hairstylist of 16 years, I know that now. Then at my age of 11, 12, I was listening to a professional. These are the professionals, and they're telling me what's best for my hair. I think something that people forget is we as Black people are just people, right? They assume that we should know how to do our hair, but that's untrue. If we're not professionals, why on earth would we know what we're doing with our hair? Just like any other person next to us. So that was something that just really stood out to me. And so once the professional told me that this was the best way to manage my hair, from then on for the next 15 years, that's what I did. And I, just like you said earlier, I slapped that relaxer on my scalp and I bit down on something, for the next 30 minutes because that's how long it needed to sit. And for 15 years until I would say my mid probably 20s, once I started to become, a little more mature, a little bit more comfortable in myself, I was always striving to fit in, even as a hairstylist, even knowing that the chemical relaxers and the heat processing was bad for my hair. Yeah. The societal pressure of trying to fit in and being raised in a home that wasn't necessarily, Black, it just really affected me throughout my entire life. And I don't know if I, looking back when you're in it and going through it, I don't know if I realized that becoming a hairstylist was because of everything that I had gone through in life, but now obviously having a little more insights and just looking back, it doesn't seem so much like divine intervention, right? If that makes sense.
It definitely does. And, I think that, as you were talking, I remember all of the painful trips to a salon when I finally was actually able to find someone that knew how to do my hair. And it certainly was to get a relaxer. And of sitting with that relaxer on my hair, maybe an extra 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, because I was assuming maybe that would get my coil to be straight a little bit longer, a little straighter than it normally would be. And I would have a bunch of blisters on my scalp as a result of it. The things that we would put ourselves through because there was this image that we thought we had to project around our hair. And you mentioned, the word manage. Words matter in so many different ways. And we think about the association we have when you hear about kinky, right? Curly, the coil, was this negative connotation. And the thing we aspired to have, I at least know for me, was the straighter, the better. And the first time I had someone, Cherie, say to me, when I was starting to go natural and say, I don't want to put this relaxer on my hair anymore. And I was in DC at the time. And as she was doing my hair, she's like, "You have the most beautiful curl pattern." And I didn't believe her. I'm like, "Oh, this is just somebody else saying what needs to be said to keep me being a customer." I really didn't believe it to be true. And I remember having those same conversations with my mother once I understood what a curl pattern was and how beautiful a curl pattern that so many of us have that is so unique to many of us from person to person, really in all parts of your hair. And I remember having that conversation with my mom, "You really have a beautiful curl pattern." And she didn't believe it either.
Right.
This is a message that we have been sold our entire life for generations. And it's really difficult for us to flip the script on that. How have you been able to flip the script?
I think that it's a challenge, honestly, because even to this day, I mean, I'm doing hair 4 to 5 days a week, and I have anecdotal evidence in my chair, 5 to 6 people a day, and I hear this repeatedly over and over and over again is this same narrative of, I went to XYZ salon and they didn't know how to care for my hair, so the first thing they did was straighten it. And I think for us, we really believe that change starts from the ground up, right? And so when these women come in our salons, or not even just women, but young boys, men, we are very intentional with what we are saying to the people in our chair. And they may not know it, but we take extra caution to make sure that they know their hair is beautiful. So especially with young people, when they come and they sit in our chair, it's, "Oh my gosh, your curl pattern is beautiful. Oh my gosh, I wish I had your hair." Because, there's this idea of good hair and bad hair, and that does not exist to me. All hair is beautiful in its own kind. And so we as a team go out of our way, and we're in such a small space. Happy Hair Studio is 550 square foot of space. We are tiny but mighty in our nature. And, we can hear everything that goes on around us. So if it's not me saying something, it's another one of the stylists. It's that constant reassurance that your hair is beautiful exactly how it grows out of your head. And there are other ways to manage your hair besides styling it and causing it harm. Heat processing, chemical processing is very harsh on our hair. Curls are just by nature the most fragile. And so we have to care for them as such. That's just one of the ways that, we go about instilling in our clients that their hair is beautiful. It's just going to take continuous conversation about their hair being accepted for what it is. And it's not just in the salon, right? I mentioned we do a lot of community work as well, especially in the schools here. The schools are so predominantly white, and by predominantly white, it's 85+% white here in Eugene. And so a lot of our young Black kids, they don't see themselves on a daily basis. So one of the things that we've done is we've got in with a program that works with the schools, and we go to them and we talk about how to care for their hair just on a basic level. What's wash day like? Because wash day is such a big thing in our culture. So I think a lot of times what happens is we don't have the tools and the resources to care for our natural hair. But if we did, what would that look like? And how would we then foster the care for our hair if we had the tools that we needed, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. Well, and one of the things that made me smile was when I was on the Pac-12 network. I was in studio, and one of the producers actually shared a Vimeo video of you and your colleagues and the Oregon women's basketball team. And it was the first time I'd heard about Happy Hair Studio. And literally watching the video, the interview, the conversations, the smiles on the faces of the players as they were saying, and the vernacular they were using about how important it was for them to take care of their hair, it made me happy.
Right.
And because it was something that I haven't experienced. Again, I live in Idaho, where I went to undergrad at Stanford. Right, we had, if you were a Black person on campus, you probably went to the same person, Benji, did your hair, Benji for hair in East Palo Alto, right? You knew that there were very limited choices that were in close proximity to where you were going to school, where you could afford to not only travel to where the shop was, but to also get your hair done as a college student. And so what you were doing is incredibly important and profound. And just the look that was on the faces of those players as they sat in the chair and they talked about the fact that they had this access to you and your team is really remarkable. And I hope you know that, like, the things that you're doing really matter for generations to come. It's not just getting their hairstyle, but it is the education and going into the schools and young people, both in the identity that we're in, as well as other identities, seeing this. And I have a question for you that I think our audience, we have a lot of people in our audience who are Black women or who identify as Black and or female. And we have a lot of allies in our audience as well. And I always get this question of, well, can I touch your hair? Can we talk about that a little bit as a woman of color and people wanting to touch your hair? What is that?
That's something that we actually talk about with a lot of the clients that come through our salon. We have a book that is for kids that is in our library of books that is literally called Don't Touch My Hair. And, I think a lot of what it is we're not animals. We're not creatures of the unknown, and if you're a white person, you don't get people coming up to you being like, oh my gosh, let me touch your hair, and it's that idea of being like an exotic being and like to people, and again, I feel like as Black people, we just want to be treated like everybody else, and the idea that somebody can just come up and touch the hair on your head without asking is absurd. But the truth is, we get it a lot of the time. And that's something that we talk about, like I said, often with the people in our chair is you have the ability to say no, to step away and be like, I don't appreciate that. Just because our hair is not something to be gawked at. And I think a lot of times that's what people see Black hair as whether it's we've heard the words unkept, unprofessional, and just the words that really get under my skin, you know, and just instilling that in our clients that you have the ability to say no. Your hair is not something to be gawked at. It is central to who you are. Just because, I mean, hair in terms of like cultural being, when you go back to early African civilization before even slave times, like our hair was celebrated in our culture. You know, hair was a sign of identity. When, you know, men went off to war, we wore our hair a certain way. And if they passed away, we wore it a certain way because we were in mourning. You could look at our hair and see what tribe we came from, you know, and when we did get to the slave days, we chose to use cornrows as a way to pave a path to freedom. We stored things like rice and food in our hair to get us to safety. So it's so much more than hair to us. It is central to who we are. It is rooted in our culture. And I think that for so long throughout the centuries, we got away from that. But that's what we need to get back to. And I think that it's always been a part of us, you know, that Black joy, that Black excellence. Our hair is a part of that and a testimony to who we are. And so that's just something that I try to hearken back to when people say, you know, well, so and so like reached out for my hair and this and that. And instead of saying, well, it's because, you know, they've never seen something like that. It's more, it's because your hair is so beautiful to them and they're not used to seeing such beauty. So how can we flip the switch to use those negative experiences in a way that can turn ourselves positive, if that makes sense?
That does. That is literally unlocking the club. Like oftentimes on our journey, we look at these clubs, and I think a decade plus ago, the club was straight hair was the only way to go, and it had to look a certain way. And I think the new club that we're unlocking for Black women, women of color, people with different types of textures of hair is like wear it with pride, how whatever your texture is. Like, right, learn about your hair, learn how to love your hair. However unique it is, however similar it is to somebody else that you know, is if we can unlock that club. And I think that the way to do it is exactly what you are creating is it's about education. And education is like the full circle of education of understanding the history of our hair and the utility and the value of it in, you know, centuries ago, understanding how to take care of it, finding where we can find products and salons and resources so that we can continue to manage it and it can flourish. Because I think that in a lot of markets, if you are outside of markets where there's a plethora of salons where you can go to and people know how to take care of your hair, it's really difficult to find products on the shelves at your Targets or even your Sally's. You may have, you know, a certain brand that you like, and they may have 2 or 3 of the products, but that don't actually work together. But right, they're checking the box to have Black hair products on the shelves. And we need to advocate for ourselves. We need to go to those shop managers and say, hey, can you start to carry this line, or can you actually start to carry this product or another? What other recommendations would you have for us, particularly those of us that are living in communities where we don't have a large variety or access to a large variety of product or stylists?
Right. I think a lot of it is trying to use the resources around you. We are in a day and age where we can learn a whole lot on the internet. And I know sometimes that can be overwhelming because, like you said, we've come quite a long way in the last 5 to 7 years in terms of just product being readily available for our type of hair. Before that, that product didn't even exist. Now, at least we have product that works with our hair, but now it's almost to a point where it's overwhelmingly so. And like you said, there's so many different types of curls, kinks, coils, and there's a huge spectrum of black hair, and that goes, even from waves to the tightest, kinkiest coils. So I think just using the resources that you have at your disposal, YouTube, I hate to say, is actually quite a great resource. And even as a hairstylist, I learned from YouTube today. I think also being willing to kind of explore the underground world of hairstyling. Something that I have learned just being in this area is there's not a whole lot of us. I would say there's maybe a handful of salons here that are even capable of seeing Black people and caring for their hair. But, I think that something that's so central to African culture is that idea that we can do hair on our own. So a lot of times, I was not raised in Black culture, but something that is so central is that idea of being in between your mom's legs, her tugging away at your hair.
You're out of the way, right? When you get that comb.
So for a lot of Black people, that's something that they grew up with. And so whether or not they are professional stylists or not, what I found here in Eugene is there's a lot of people that braid hair out of their home, and if you're willing, as a student, as a community member, to get your hair done in that way, there are resources that are there for you. And that's something, that I try to communicate to other people, is that a lot of times we're only 4 people, us in the Happy Salon. And when I say we book out, and so part of it makes me feel like we're not actually that accessible, which I just hate. I don't like to turn people away. I don't want to make people wait 4 to 6 weeks to come and see me. But I am the first person to say, well, if you're willing, I have this list of other people who can braid your hair and who can be resources to you. Because at the end of the day, we are more concerned with creating accessibility than making money, right? Like that's my goal at the end of the day, especially in an area that is so predominantly white. It is so hard to find somebody here to do your hair. And you mentioned, like, when you saw our video, that's something that the athletes said, is it's so challenging to find somewhere to get your hair done. And so, regardless of whether or not you're in a salon, I will be the first person to recommend you to somebody else that can get you in ASAP, as long as I believe that they, can maintain your hair health and they are, a good enough stylist to get the job done. That's something that we have just had to embrace because of our locale. It's the truth of the matter.
Yeah. Well, you are certainly providing education and resources to so many in your community. I wonder what you, over the course of this journey that you're on, have learned about yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. It's so funny because sometimes I'll take a step back and just look. I'm 34, still learning a lot about my life, but I'll take a step back and kind of look at how far I've come. And, honestly, out of high school, I went straight to beauty school. And I wish I could tell you it's because I knew at that moment that I was meant to be a hairstylist and I was meant to change the paradigm. But honestly, I was an 18-year-old kid who needed a career. And I knew that because of the lack of opportunity to learn how to do my hair, I had to learn on my own. And so I was just naturally talented in that sense that I know how, I learned how to care for my hair because there was no one else to do it for me. And so I had that just kind of natural born talent. And school took 9 months. And so sign me up, I came from a family where we didn't have a whole lot of wealth. It was mostly like paycheck to paycheck. And I knew in myself that I wanted to give my future kids something better. And so straight out of high school, I went to beauty school and got my license right away, started working in a very fast hair cutting place. And that's kind of where you start to learn the basics. In school, they don't teach you a whole lot. They definitely don't teach you a lot in the sense of learning how to do the kinky, coily hair. Black hair was one chapter in a book and one chapter only. And it was not about how to care or maintain your natural curls. It was how to straighten your natural hair and how to manage it. And by managing it, it was either chemically straightening, it was heat processing, it was everything that we as hairstylists should know is not caring for your hair. And then I took a couple years just to do hair, and my parents had instilled in me this idea that I needed to go to college to succeed. I think that was something that was just in my parents' generation is if you wanted to succeed in life, you had to go to college. So I did. I went to college. I went to a university in the Bay Area. I did hair all throughout college. And it was actually a great profession to have while trying to get my degree. I had some money in my pocket every now and again. So that was nice. I got my degree, took a few years off from hair and worked in San Francisco for a tech company in communications, which is a whole nother story and has also been such a foundational piece of me running my own business. I learned so much just in a whole different field of how to implement those skills into what I am today. But once I had a child, your priorities change a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I decided that I needed to go back to hair, not only because I was missing it, but because as a mother, I wanted to be able to have it all. I wanted to be able to be there for those moments for my child, but I also needed more. I needed more. I needed to be a part of society in some way. And so I started working here in Eugene, of all places. And before I knew it, I was like really busy, super busy. And it was because there was such a hole in the market. There was such a demand for my services. And I think people, especially Black women, feel more comfortable when they would come to me and see that I also had curls and that I had lived that same life and that same hair journey that they lived. And so now, obviously, I have a salon, and standing here and looking back into the past, I learned that I think everything really happens for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that maybe subconsciously, I didn't know what was at bay, but now looking back into it, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that I was that 11-year-old girl and had this huge epiphany that hair was a big part of me, and that traumatic experience that I had throughout my life. And it was one of many. That wasn't the only, traumatic experience that I had had in a salon. I had also, just through life, been to many other salons and had terrible experiences. So that really formed that idea somewhere in my subconscious that, look, you need to go forward and make a difference, make a change. If you didn't like how you felt as that little girl, imagine all those other little girls and young men that feel that way. So just that moment in life just really fueled and outlined who I am today. And just learning that it it's really those little moments in life that stick with you, but also allow you to become who you are and really grasp onto those moments, those defining moments in life. Because I feel like passion comes from those defining moments. And now that I have the salon today, I've been able to take that experience and learn from it and create something completely different so that the next 11-year-old little girl that walks into my salon doesn't have that experience that I did. And so if I can not only operate a business and make a living, but also change someone's thinking along the way, I think that's the most important thing ever.
Yes, everything does happen for a reason. And as you were sharing your story and your journey, I was drawn to the fact and the question, if you will, has it taken this long for you to validate what your journey was? Because it felt like even as you're sharing that story, that there were some, like you had to get to this place to validate the fact that you chose to go to beauty school first. The fact that then, even in spite of the fact that your family wanted you to go to college, you didn't go right away. It felt like there still is inside of you in your story, there's still the necessity to have some justification for the route that you've taken.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely 100%. I think that we're all on a journey and, you know, validation is important. Speaking of validation, that validation that you and Jordan gave us, you know, in that couple-minute piece where you talked about, you know, how significant the access to hair care was. I mean, that's instrumental. You know, just hearing other Black women validate the experience that I had, that many others had, it's so very important. And I think that, I mean, it's a process. Even today, you know, as a Black woman, as someone that was not necessarily raised in a Black home, I had to find my Blackness outside of the home after I left the home. So I don't think that actually happened till college, you know, till I was really able to discover my Blackness outside of my parents, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And so getting that validation from alike people is everything.
Yeah.
It really does make all of the difference.
Yes. And that's why the message when you're an 11-year-old girl and you walk in a salon, in a grocery store, in a restaurant, and people say you can't be here, how that impacts you because you spend years trying to prove that you belong.
Mm.
And sometimes that actually precludes you from finding the thing that is your biggest strength and power. Right? Because you're
Absolutely.
looking at others to try to figure out, like, how can I fit in? And it gets back
Right.
to Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like we all want to feel like we belong somewhere. And for
Mhm.
you, what you have created at Happy Hair Salon is the ability for so many young boys and girls, men and women in your community, and those who identify in whatever their identities are, around their hair, to feel like they can fit in and they can find their club or their community where they can not just survive, but they can thrive. And I am grateful to you for that. I'm going to try to get on your schedule early on whenever I find, if I have a game
Yes.
in Eugene,
No,
Oregon.
Angela, we will welcome you with open arms.
I would say, wait a minute, I'm going to be there in 2 months. Can I get on your schedule? But no,
Yes.
I applaud everything that you're doing. And there's tangible ways that you probably don't even realize that you are giving somebody a chance to see themselves, the exact same journey that you were on. You're giving them that validation that we so desperately need as individuals. And sometimes because of our hair, we have not received. And so I'm grateful to you for that. And there's so much more that I actually want to hear about you and your story and your journey. Absolutely want to get some tips from you on, like, if you were to just start doing our own hair, what are 2 or 3 things that we can do to take care of our hair and make sure that we have a healthy, happy coif? And that is Cherie Gatson. I'm Angela Taylor. We're here on Unlocking the Club. We have so much more that we want to cover on the back nine. So we will be right back on Unlocking the Club. Are you feeling stuck in your career or your business? Are you struggling to identify your unique talents and strengths? Well, I have some exciting news for you. I'm Angela Taylor, host of the Unlocking the Club podcast, with a really special opportunity for you to find more joy and more productivity in your professional and/or personal life. As a certified coach, I'm now certified in Patrick Lencioni's 6 Types of Working Genius. So my Unlocking Your Working Genius coaching package will help you uncover your working genius and unleash your full potential. In this special coaching engagement, we use a proven methodology to help you identify your natural talents and your areas of strength. And then we guide you in creating an action plan to leverage those strengths for greater success in your life, career, and/or business. So whether you're a business owner, an executive, or simply looking to advance your career, we can help you reach your full potential. Don't let your talents go untapped. Contact us today to schedule your Working Genius assessment and schedule your coaching sessions. Visit us at unlockingtheclub.com/coaching. Join us today and start unlocking your working genius for a brighter future. Welcome back to Unlocking the Club. I'm your host, Angela Taylor. I am here with our special guest, Cherie Gatson, who's been talking about happiness and happiness through beautiful hair. All have, and we just have to find our way to actually trusting and believing that we all are beautiful inside and out, and that our hair is beautiful as well. So here with the founder and owner of Happy Hair Studio in Eugene, Oregon. And Cherie, like one of the things that talk to my friends so often about is we trade secrets. Like, so what are you doing? What product are you using? What are some tips? Make sure that you're trimming your hair on a regular basis. What are some tips that you have that we all can incorporate into our hair regimen so that we can have a healthy?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. So I would say one of the first things is something about curly hair, and that's whether your hair is wavy, curly, kinky, coily. There is a whole array of curls. Our hair is just naturally prone to dryness. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you have in your hair routine is moisture, products that are going to instill moisture in your hair. And one of the things that is the most important when considering products is something called porosity. I think that that's always the question, the most popular question we get when somebody sits in our chair is, how do I know how to select the right products for my hair? And a lot of times people think it's based on your curl pattern or your wave pattern. And there is a whole system out there, a whole curl type chart that has become popular in the last 5 years. And a lot of you have probably heard of it. It starts with 2A and it goes to 4C. I think there is a misconception about products in the sense that that is how we choose our products, but it's actually based on your porosity. And porosity is obviously a very scientific, thing when it comes to hair, but in layman's terms, it's simply your hair's ability to retain or absorb moisture. And so usually people with curls and kinks and coils have either low porosity or high porosity. And I like to explain porosity in the sense of shingles on a roof. So if you were to take a magnifying glass and look at one strand of your hair through a magnifying glass, it would almost look like the shingles on a roof. And if your hair is low porosity, your roof is brand new. It means that it has just been replaced. So therefore, there is no holes, there's no leaks in your roof, right? And so that means that in hair terms, you have a very difficult time of getting products, moisture, water into your hair, right? Okay. So a lot of times, if you have low porosity hair, a very good way of telling this is when you get into the shower or when you get water onto your hair, it takes forever to wet your hair down, right? So that's a very good sense of, okay, I have low porosity hair. If you have high porosity hair, your roof is old, girl. It's been on that house for a minute, right? So that means you have lots of holes in your roof. You have leaks everywhere. And so it's very easy for moisture and product to get into your hair, but it also is very easy for it to fall out of your hair. So that's kind of the conundrum between low and high porosity. And so my suggestion to you is to determine whether or not your hair is low or high porosity, and then go from there when you are selecting your products. And I can go on and on about this. But if you guys, really want to learn more, I encourage you to go to the Happy website, because we have blogs and videos about how to find your hair's porosity, and then what ingredients from there will actually really benefit your hair based on your porosity. Another really big thing is hair texture. And texture is simply the diameter of a hair strand, a single hair strand. And this is a misconception, is that Black people can have all different types of textures, right? A lot of times people assume that you have Black hair, so that means your hair is coarse. And that is just simply untrue. A lot of times people with Black hair still have very fine hair, and that means that they have a very small diameter of hair. And that's why your hair gets tangled a lot of the times, is because you have the perfect recipe for tangles. You have a lot of hair density wise, and it's also fine. So it gets very tangled easily, right? So pay attention to your texture. The smaller the diameter of the hair strand, the finer your hair is. The bigger the diameter of the hair strand, the coarser your hair texture is, right? So consider that. Another big thing is hair protection, right? Especially when you're sleeping. This is something I think that a lot of people glance over. Get yourself a silk pillowcase, get yourself a hair bonnet. They are a part of our culture for a reason, because it's important to protect your hair at night. I know I'm a crazy sleeper, so when my head's moving around, if I had a cotton pillowcase, that's just a way that your hair can break and get damaged. So a few tips from an insider.
Nice, nice. So as you're talking, I'm thinking that we were going to have you on to one of our Facebook lives to do an education.
Oh, I'd be so
about the
happy.
hair.
Anything,
Okay.
anytime you need me.
That is in our future for sure. Well, and I think when you talk about texture, like you can also have multiple textures in the same hair, because
Oh
it
my
feels like
gosh,
for me, like the
yes.
back of my kitchens and the crown of my head, two very different textures.
Yes, Angela, I have like the whole back of my head. I don't know if I'm on camera or
You
not.
are, you are.
I have an undercut. And the reason I got this undercut, not that you can tell because I have so much hair.
Yeah.
The reason I got that undercut is because the back of my hair was wavy in comparison to all of these curls. So it was always such a challenge for me to try and style my hair down, because it always looked like I had a shelf. I'd have just like, maybe an inch of hair that was like down to like my mid back. It's so very common. And that's why when people are talking about the curl type chart, it's not my favorite thing, because it's very rare that you are one curl type. You are prone to have multiple curl types on your head of hair and multiple textures as well. And that's something that I tell a lot of people in my chair. They think it's almost something that is odd or weird, but it's not. It's extremely common to have, a little bit of 2C, a little bit of 3A and 3B in your hair as well.
Very good to know. Well, thank you for those tips. I think that those will definitely resonate with our listeners. And now to kind of get to know who you are a little bit more, curious, besides your own home, where do you feel the most comfortable or safe to be yourself?
Girl, in my salon, I have to say, Angela, outside of just creating a place for the community, I have created a place for myself, because one of the hardest things, I'm not from here, I'm from California. I've been here for about 8 years now, but one of the hardest transitions coming from a place that is, just a melting pot of color to a place where you don't see hardly any type of culture. So one of the things I realized was when I created Happy was that I was creating a place for myself as well. It's my second home. My co-founders and I, we're like family. And so one of the things that people usually say is that outside of just our ability to do hair is the vibe. The vibe is unmatchable. And that's something that I think we uniquely have created in our space is just the ability for anybody to walk in. And it's not just Black people. I don't want to be divisive. I don't like the idea of Black salons versus white salons. It's anybody. I want Black and white people and Asian and any color to feel comfortable together in that space and to foster that community. And I think fostering that for the community has allowed me to also live in that space and take from that space and feel connected here in the community.
Well, it's evident that you've actually been able to accomplish that. There's two things from that video that we shared, and we're going to share that. So we'll have it in our show notes for this episode, so you'll get a chance to take a look at that fantastic video, and we'll certainly have it on our social media pages. But there's two things that were part of that 3-minute video that resonated with me and that indicate that you actually have created this vibe at Happy Hair Salon. One was Filipina Che, who is a player with
we love her.
University of Oregon women's basketball team. And so she was talking like she had this education, this language that we talk about, protective styles, and this look on her face, and how she had her head held high as she was doing the interview. Like that's like there are subtle little things there, but I know for Black female student athletes who don't have access to a hair salon, that doesn't show up. And so you have created a vibe. That was one of the things. And the second was toward the end of the video, you said something to the effect of that you want people to be able to walk in regardless of their hair and know that we can get it done. And so like you love styling hair, no matter what package it comes in, gender, race, whatever. And that is also evidenced by how you speak about who you all are and what you're trying to create in that community.
Thank you so much for saying that. First off, I'm glad that you got that from the video. I think that especially, for these student athletes, the University of Oregon, for those of you who don't know, is here in Eugene. And I got to shout out my team because one of my team members, Cassie Chambers, that whole University of Oregon project was mostly her doing. And I think that just one of the things that I want to instill in others is not going at it alone. And for so long, I was somebody who I wanted to have all the control. It was very hard for me to relinquish that control. And then in 2020, the George Floyd stuff happened. And I think I was working with these women and we realized that we were so much alike in the sense that we were so uniquely positioned in our community to do more, especially in the industry of hair and the salon industry. And having those like-minded individuals that believe the same thing that you do, but not just that, but will go to bat for you, right? And that are also, bettering the business name by just their desire to do things for the community. Cassie is one of our braiders at Happy Hair Studio. And, she is out there making change as well. She's a white braider, which is, I feel like has a lot of controversy in itself. But for me, as a hair professional, you're a hair professional and you do hair. It has nothing to do with your race, because as a Black hair professional, I'm expected to do all types of hair. And I do all types of hair. I'd say 50% of my clientele is also white. So I think that just kind of breaking down those constructs and those norms and ideas of, what it is to do hair and who you have to be, I think being able to connect with a community of people who believe the same things as you to an extent where they will knock down doors and push down barriers is so key. And that's something that I have really learned. And I think the past 3 years, I had never really been privy to a group of women like the women that I'm working with today. So I have to also give a shout out to my team members because they're right there next to me, like in the trenches, making change.
Mm. Well, and so you're living into your values and your mission. So, right, hair artists in pursuit of inclusion is who
Yes.
you are, inclusive in all aspects of the business and the work. One of the things that struck me in just reading your bio again was the story of that 11-year girl. I can't get that picture out of my head. And again, the journey that you've been on. And I imagine the first time that 11-year girl walked into a salon, like didn't have a care in the world, hadn't been exposed to so much of the systems and the structures that actually prevent her from feeling like she could belong. I wonder, in the years since, are there still any places or situations in which you walk into with trepidation?
Um, yeah, I think there's quite a few places I think I still walk into. That's based on our locale and where we are. I don't know if some of these places would make me feel the same way, but just here and specifically the Pacific Northwest, you know, Eugene and Portland are very much this very forward thinking and progressive place, but there's also all of these little towns around us that are very much not the same. And I have been to these places and I have felt like I don't belong. Just the looks, the stares, the glances, the gawking that you get. I still feel that on a daily basis here in Eugene, But I will say that I think we are starting to come out of that a little bit. Just in the 8 years living here, there's been a lot more diversity that's coming to the area. I think that society is starting to change in a way that is becoming more accepting of who we are. But yeah, there's still definitely those places that I go. I think, especially those places that are, I think one of the places that I've tried to break through is into like the education system in hair, specifically, like the folks who decide what education we have to tick off that box that says you get a license, and that's a place where I've had a whole lot of pushback. I have tried to break down doors. I have tried to be a resource to them to allow them to then forward our education system so that we don't continue to have this trickle down effect of graduating hairstylists that don't know how to do all types of hair, right? That's where the change really needs to happen for us to really see this large wave of change happen. It has to start with the people high up, which is always, I think, where the challenge is. The challenge of breaking barriers is being myself, a Black young woman, and gaining the respect that I need for them to see me as I see myself.
Yeah.
It has always been a challenge.
And that is definitely unlocking the club. Like, right, when you start to think about where the power in this industry, right? And we know the hair industry, $1 billion plus industry, right?
Absolutely.
And there still are some things that prevent everyone from being able to flourish. And so things like that, you being in conversation with on the education side, making sure that people have access and that they change their perspective on what education in that space will be. And I think the other thing
Right.
that I've heard a lot from, women or people that own hair salons is from the banking industry of actually believing that it's a viable business, that there is a market that could sustain being able to raise capital to be able to grow
Absolutely.
as well.
And I think that honestly, I think back throughout my career, and I think had I known that the hair business could be a successful business, maybe I wouldn't have, gone to college or, had that detour in my life. But at that moment in life, no one had told me that I could be successful as a hairstylist or a salon owner. A lot of what you talk about is unlocking the club. And when I was preparing just to speak to you, a lot of what I thought about was, I don't know if I've necessarily unlocked the club. I think more of it has been me creating my own club and our own club and our own lane. And my theory is like, I am not about to wait outside in line to get into a club. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we're just going to have to create our own space, our own club, and go from there. And then hopefully disrupt the club that we've been trying to get into for a really long time.
Yes, I think that that is the lesson that we're learning is that, for so long we were fighting against the odds, right, to try to enter these clubs where, we may never truly be able to sit at the table in a comfortable way and be seen. And
Right.
so, we can continue to do that. There's nothing wrong if that is our choice. And if we feel like that is our destiny, and there's also ways for us to validate who we are and to start to
Mhm.
build and create our own clubs as well. So I love
Right.
that.
Absolutely.
Well, as you're creating your own club, what have you found to be your superpower?
Ooh. Um, I outside of hair, which myself obviously I'm master in hair. I've been doing hair for a very long time, but I am a jack of all trades, Angela. I can do a little bit of everything. And I think that's been one of my superpowers is something about being in the salon industry is you have to be a little bit of everything, something that I feel like sets me apart is my ability to empathize. We have to empathize with the people in our chair, listen. I have a degree in communications. So that has really come in handy. And back then I didn't necessarily put two and two together, but now it makes total sense. Just being able to hear the people in your chair, listen to them, empathize with them, but also be my authentic self with them so that they feel like they can be their authentic self with me. So there's a little bit of therapy going on there.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
also, like, we also have to do hair well. We're chemists. We have to learn how to cut hair. There's a lot that goes into that. But also, like, owning a business, I have to be a marketer and an advertiser, and I have to be good with my words, and able to market myself. And that time spent in San Francisco, doing marketing and PR for a tech firm, all of that skill that I learned has really gone in to helping me build the business that I have today. And a lot of it I do on my own. I don't have like a team of people behind me. It's all me. Outside of the girls, of course, that help me in the salon. But when it comes to the administrative stuff, it's me. And I think just being able to wear multiple hats, just be artistic. I create all of our marketing, all of our design, like that's all me. So I honestly think that that has probably been one of my biggest superpowers is just being able to kind of wear multiple hats. I think that I can learn to do most anything. And that's kind of been my thing is like, it might take a little time up front, but I can learn how to do it and I'll do it well.
Yeah. Well, as you are juggling all of these balls and doing a variety of things and doing them very well, when you get the sense of being at your best, and I know we all define being at our best very differently,
Mhm.
and at different stages in our life, our best may feel and look very different. How would you define that? And what is true for you when you are operating at your best?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think in order to operate at my best, I also have to prioritize myself. So that's something that I think I've probably only learned in my 30s. I used to just burn myself, to a crisp trying to do it all. But I learned that in order to operate at my best, I also have to feed myself as well. So, you know, doing the self-care that it takes to be able to give my all in the salon. Let me tell you, like talking and having conversation with anywhere from 5 to 8 people a day, it takes a lot out of you, right? Especially, when you're a person who actually, I care for the people in my chair and I want to give them my best. So, in order to do so, it means that I have to be in tune with myself, my feelings. And honestly, there are days that I show up and I can't be my best just because of whatever is going on in my life. Cause we're all human, we're people too. But in order to show up as my best, I have to value myself and also understand the presence that I hold in the salon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and giving yourself the grace that's
Oh my
required.
gosh, yes,
No,
which I'm not always the best at. Don't get me wrong.
it's really
But
difficult.
it really is. I think that we are our worst critics, like 100, at least for myself. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I hold myself to a very high standard. And I think a lot of that has been because I have probably spent the majority of my career trying to prove to others that I'm enough. Right. And I think that comes a lot with the territory of who we are as Black women. Unfortunately, people don't always see our value and our power and the just amazingness that we bring. So I have had to, when I show up in a room with high stake people, a lot of times I feel like I can't mess up. I feel like I can't stumble over my words, things like that. That stuff, is obviously something that I'm working through. We're all still growing, but it's something that I understand in myself is that I am my worst critic. And it's not me necessarily competing with the world, it's me competing against myself and my own standards of what greatness is.
Well, Cherie, what was the tipping point for you in realizing that you are enough? And are there moments where you kind of go back in that rabbit hole and start to question it?
Yeah, I think the tipping point was when I had my daughter and really stepping back and thinking about what I wanted to instill in her and how I moved really affected how she would then move in the future and see herself. Right. And so that's when I really started to think about giving myself grace and knowing that some days I'm just not capable at being 100%, you know? And I think that, yes, absolutely. There are still days when I wake up and it's just one of those days where I'm not feeling it. I'm tired, or it's a rough day. Things are going on. Um, and so there's those days, but you know what? When I wake up in the morning and I feel one of those days, I look in the mirror and I tell myself that I'm a baddie, and I tell myself over and over and over again, and I think just affirmations, super important, super important to me, and just speaking, what you want into existence.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because, right, people may look at you from the outside looking in, have your own business, successful, doing a lot of important things in your community, has a daughter, right, raising a family and thinking that everything is fine.
Mm,
And it's really important for us to also be able to say, here's here's what's true for
yeah,
me, good, bad, and indifferent. So thank you for sharing that. And I know you have a
absolutely.
lot going on. You're juggling a lot of different hats, building a lot of important things and structures in the Eugene area. Where can our listeners find you? And are there any projects that you have coming up?
Yes, people can find us. We're on Instagram. We're very active on Instagram. You can find the hair salon at Happy, and Happy is spelled HAPI .hair.studio on Instagram. We're posting continuous work, education, so you can find us there. And if you're ever wanting to learn tidbits or tips on how to care for your hair, we do a lot of that as well. You can also find my personal work at Cherie Gatson Hair on Instagram. That's Cherie Gatson, Gatson hair. We also have a website at happyhapihair.net. And in terms of projects, nothing huge, but we're just always at foot in the community I specifically am working on a really big project this year for our local Juneteenth celebration this year. And we do an annual Juneteenth celebration in Eugene, and it's put on by Black community members, just local members volunteering their time. This is the 4th annual celebration. This is my 2nd year helping out. This year, the theme is Black Hair Matters. So, of course, Happy stood up and said, we got this, and we are creating a whole hair zone. The event is free to all people. So anybody listening, that's in the Pacific Northwest, the event will be on the 18th of June. There will be a whole hair zone where we're celebrating the amazingness of Black hair. There will be hands-on learning, education. We will also have local hair vendors and businesses there to connect with people in the community. So I'm super excited for that. That's been my thing. That's a number one priority because it's coming up quick. Stuff just happens to sneak up on us. So that's the biggest thing that we're working on right now. But there's always things going on where you can find us.
Great. Well, kudos to you and your team for what you continue to do in that community, the impact that you're having on so many different individuals. And thank you so much for joining us today on Unlocking the Club.
Thank you so much for having me, Angela. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure was all ours. And I cannot wait to check the vibe out at Happy Hair Salon.
Yes, if you ever find yourself coming to the university, you know that you got to stop by the studio.
I will definitely do that. Thank you so much, Cherie.
Thank you.
Another great episode here of Unlocking the Club. So thankful to Cherie Gatson from Happy Hair Salon in Eugene, Oregon for joining us for today's episode of Unlocking the Club. Such a great conversation and a really important conversation, I think, that we all are finding when we think about just taking care of our hair. When I started on my journey in the corporate space, I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to wear my hair, but I did talk to my mother about it. And we had a conversation about what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And at that time, it was, you had to go ahead and get your hair relaxed. And I think still to this day, my hair is a topic of consideration on a regular basis. And I'm one of those folks that if I didn't have to worry about it, I wouldn't worry about it. And I appreciate what Cherie and her team at Happy Hair Salon are doing. And it comes down to one of the messages that she shared today, and it's about valuing yourself. Whether it is what you're doing, what your superpower is, your hair, whatever it is that you need to validate who you are, it comes from inside. It's internal. It can't come from somebody else. And I hope that our conversation today with Cherie enlighten you in many powerful ways so that if it is about your hair, and if you aren't in a space where you have access to great resources, that you'll look it up. You'll go to YouTube and find resources, that you'll look on the Happy Hair Salon website and read their blogs and find out how you can care for yourself and care for your hair and be in wellness as we're all on this journey. Again, so grateful for today's conversation. And it's not over. I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion because it's deep rooted. There's a lot of need and necessity for us to continue having this conversation and to normalize it, not to hide it, not just to do it in closed doors, but to actually normalize Black hair. And so I hope you all enjoyed today's conversation here on Unlocking the Club. I'm your host, Angela Taylor. If you want to continue the discussion, find us on our Facebook page, Unlocking the Club. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper, find us on the Codebreakers Lounge, our private Facebook group, where we dig a little bit deeper and we have these personal conversations about what we can do to continue to unlock the club. And until next time in our next episode, we hope you all will be well. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.